have Ukrainian forces continued their advance in the counteroffensive, but is their momentum slowing? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's June 14th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first let's take a look at the control map. In the last maybe 24 hours, there's only been really fairly minor frontline updates. So what we have is first a little bit of progress actually in some interesting locations. The first, of course, you can see here, Russian forces pushing a little bit near the settlement of Dorozhnyanka. Looks like to be maybe pushing back against what might have been a Ukrainian feint or teasing axis or probing axis, where Ukrainian forces at the outside of the counteroffensive launched a small attack that was meant to confuse Russian forces as to the direction of the real attack. We haven't seen much action from this area. You can see since the counteroffensive has really started over the, even if we go back 2 weeks. So I think that any efforts to push here may have simply been, again, a feinting effort. But the territory exchanging hands is of little value. You can see Russia holding this. It will be a strong defensive position, but it's not necessarily defending anything of, no key avenue of advance or anything like that. The other part that I thought was really interesting was actually not insignificant of expansion of Ukrainian controlled territory near Robotyne. And this is interesting because we've been hearing about Robotyne for some time. It is frequently discussed as it was discussed when several weeks ago, if you were on the live stream, you knew that there was a lot of discussion about Robotyne and efforts to push towards Tokmak, and whether this would be a key route of advance for the Ukrainian counteroffensive effort. And so it's interesting to see this area actually expand out a little bit, simply because it may indicate that Ukraine has not abandoned efforts to push towards, again, this Tokmak, which is significant. And we'll take a look at the control map here in a minute. Significant in that it contains a critical military airbase. And by most reports, Russian combat aircraft have been flying a lot of close air support throughout the southern front here. They've generally reported that, because this is open terrain, right, and formations are a little more dispersed, Russian combat aircraft can do a little better in terms of engaging targets and providing that cast, in contrast to Bakhmut, where your friendly forces, if you're Russian, your friendly forces are within dozens of meters of your enemy positions, which means that that's considered dangerous for NATO aircraft with precision guided munitions to strike that close. It's probably considered almost a crapshoot when you have Russian aircraft with unguided munitions. There's almost no way you can reliably get combat air support to deliver accurate fire in those sort of distances. But when you've got more open terrain, suddenly Russian combat aircraft can be effective, even without necessarily advanced guided munitions. But those are really the only two changes to the front line. And we'll take a look at this in a second, but I did want to shout out, if you are curious about the footage coming out of this, and you've probably seen a bunch of the footage coming out of this conflict, why don't I do breakdowns of it? Well, the answer is that YouTube and Patreon have banned me from doing any analysis of any war footage, not just combat footage, but any footage of the war in basically any capacity. I can do interviews of people who are in the trenches, but only if there's no combat taking place at all. I do all that analysis then on combatvetnews.com. And it's also the best way to support the channel. If you want to become a member, any one of these tiers is going to get you access to the exclusive room on the Discord, as well as all of the members only analysis of the combat videos, which gives us insight we can't get anywhere else. And a new video is actually going to be dropping today. So become a member. The link is going to be right up here and in the description and in the pinned comment. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the Ukraine conflict map. And this is what I thought was interesting. Very interesting, in fact, is that Ukrainian forces have reported as of an hour ago that near Voldar, their military was able to advance 1 kilometer deep into Russian positions. This is fascinating because, one, Voldar isn't really considered a prime axis of advance by in this conflict, in this counteroffensive. And in fact, Voldar has been the site where Russian forces have conducted a lot of assaults themselves. Now, 1 kilometer of Russian forces, we'll pull up the map here because I think this is the most accurate, control map. I suspect is probably something like this. Right. So this is actually 2.5 kilometers, this line here. And I think this is probably where they're going to be trying to advance. Right. They're going to try to push Russian forces out of this wooded area that's been contested for a while, seize this wooded area, and then advance towards Mykilsky. They're going to probably use this large water barrier, which looks like a reservoir and maybe somewhat dammed or siphoned off into 3 feeder rivers. But they're going to try to probably push into this and get the Russian forces, at least on the backside of this river. This is just a logical way to manage this sort of event. And you can see that they're probably, but it may also be an effort to push Russian forces and pressure them near Pavlivka, because you can see they're not far away from this Ukrainian effort. Pavlivka dealing with Ukrainian forces on the north and on the east. And so maybe the Ukrainians are saying, hey, we can also, if we can at least make the western part of Mykilsky contested, forces in Pavlivka will have a really hard time and maybe forced to withdraw to the next defensive position, which you can see is basically going to be this Yahorivka and maybe this wooded area here. This seems a little thin to try to actually defend. Plus, it's the angle isn't correct. If you're talking about an enemy advancing from your east or from your north, from the north, it's like, okay, but you're not really facing either enemy. This is just not going to be a good defensive position. You can also see, as we always talk about, it's got a river running through it, which means this might be low ground. So this may not be the defensive zone you want it to be. This may be better. This may be a little bit better. Yahorivka and this wooded area here. So that would, I suspect, is what Ukraine's larger strategy is here, pushing in Voldar. Again, do I like this highly dispersed strategy? I don't, but I also don't like the extremely long delays in the counteroffensive. I'm just a man who favors simplicity as a tactician, right? Even simple plans are complicated, and you can run a pretty meat and potatoes playbook, and be very effective if you execute well, have good technology, and a really good logistics support system. People forget that. One of the other news items that I thought was worth talking about is the fate of Russian Duma deputy and commander of the Chechen Rosguardia branch, Adam Delimkanov. This is one of Kadyrov's right-hand men, has been missing. And Kadyrov is apparently searching very desperately for his deputy. Some claim that he was KIA or WIA. Excuse me. Other sources are saying that he's alive and unharmed and just sort of cut off from communication. Right? And Kadyrov published a video of him with Delimkanov, but on an unspecified date because of rumors circulating about his condition. And Kadyrov then blamed the Ukrainians for circulating reports of his death, even though he himself and many Russian sources were the ones who initially reported it. It's very bizarre, and I think it reflects the fact that he realizes that if he can't even keep his commander safe, a lot of that Chechen invincibility, Chechen forces taking the fight to the enemy is not a good look. It's not a good look if you can't keep your highest level commander safe, especially it's not a good look for recruitment. So that's probably why he is trying to claim that, or at least obfuscate the information space regarding the fate of his commander. Anyway, guys, that's really all I had for today. As always, thank you so much to everyone, especially to those of the Combat Vet News site, the 1% of the 1% who become members. Thank you guys so much. We're going to update this. I know we've had a bunch of new colonel members, a bunch of new lieutenant tier members. We're going to be adding you guys on today, and I'll see all you guys in the next one.